Would Red Velvet be better off without the red side of their concept? This is a conversation that simmers up every time Red Velvet releases a song that is less than desirable to their Velvet-minded audiences. It doesn't always come in the form of this exact question, but the frustration or concern that some people express over their more experimental and vibrant concept releases surely seems to suggest that this is the core of the issue for some people. If you don't know, Red Velvet's concept is the distinction between both words in their group name. The red side of their concept takes the form of more vibrant, colorful, and experimental pop releases, and the Velvet side assumes pretty much everything else. Velvet is the R&B focused, slower, and elegant tracks throughout their discography. Anytime Red Velvet releases a Velvet focused track as the title track, it tends to hang over their heads for quite a while. People are still quite vocal about their want for, quote, another Psycho, even as we're coming up on 5 years of it being released. And yet, Red Velvet still hasn't quite delivered that again as far as title tracks go. Another thing about Red Velvet's concept is that they never do the same thing twice. No two releases are going to sound the same or use the same subject material. This has never happened in Red Velvet's discography besides 2 releases from 2018. There was one moment in their career where this rule was broken, I believe intentionally, and with conversations about whether or not Red Velvet would have been better off without their red concept in mind, I want to analyze these 2 releases in retrospect. To invoke what was arguably one of the most successful songs out of 2018 K-pop and a concept that is historically well received for Red Velvet, only to turn it around and take perhaps their strongest endeavor towards the opposite end of their concept, Really Bad Boy was released towards the end of 2018. Importantly, at the end of November. It's a song about getting chased down by a bad boy werewolf accompanied by a music video with horror film references, released a month after Halloween, kind of outlining the full extent of how ridiculous the red side of their concept can be. As someone who was a Revelove at the time, I remember very well that this song was a breaking point for people in the K-pop community who had been warming up to Red Velvet after the incredible run they had in the years prior to this release. Bad Boy, in particular, released at the start of the year in 2018, launched Red Velvet to become the #1 girl group globally throughout most of the year. By February, they had become the first girl group to reach 2 million monthly listeners on Spotify. Synthesizing the trajectory of Red Velvet up until the point before its release, Really Bad Boy conceptually misses the mark in almost every regard, and even the album sales suffered as a result of that. Really Bad Boy ended up performing quite well in Korea, but the animosity surrounding this release in the wake of Bad Boy's incredible reception was genuinely unavoidable at the time. Really Bad Boy failed to read the room in every way, which again is exactly the concept of Red Velvet. This is the red side of their concept. I know people look back at the trajectory of Red Velvet's career and really resent SM for not capitalizing on Bad Boy's success. Red Velvet could have taken their career to insane heights if SM didn't stifle it, but I don't believe Really Bad Boy, despite the animosity people had towards it at the time, is the real culprit here. It's overlooked in the grand scheme of Red Velvet's discography, but I think its release was very intentional on SM's behalf. I don't remember, and I don't think I've seen many people ever discussing why Bad Boy was even invoked in the first place. There was an obvious intention behind releasing this song almost a year following the global success of Bad Boy. It had to have been developed knowing comparisons were going to be made. Red Velvet had even released an English version of Bad Boy in the meantime, their first ever English version of a song. It was clear in ways like this that SM was aware of Bad Boy's great reception globally. Looking at it in retrospect, I do think the release of Really Bad Boy was SM Entertainment trying to capitalize on Bad Boy's success, but not in a way that sacrificed the artistic integrity of this group. This is the only solid instance in Red Velvet's career that we've had the same subject material discussed but observed from both extremes of Red Velvet's concept. Bad Boy is on the extreme end of the Velvet concept, and Really Bad Boy is on the extreme end of the Red concept. Really Bad Boy takes the original material of Bad Boy and transforms it into K-pop at its most primal state. It is a gross oversimplification of pop music, whether intentional or not, and hinges on the efficacy of a single refrain section to build up the entire song's narrative and tone. It's like Rookie in a lot of ways, but takes even more risks to fully deliver on its quite demanding concept. As I said, the song narratively follows Red Velvet being hunted down by a bad boy werewolf. High-pitched screams arrive at unexpected moments throughout the song to possibly indicate that the werewolf is near. And so, when I say Really Bad Boy broke the Red Velvet concept, I think it was done so intentionally. Red Velvet never does the same thing twice, and so discussing the same narrative idea from 2 different conceptual perspectives in less than a year feels incredibly intentional. An English version of Really Bad Boy was released along with the album, and still to this day, these are the only 2 songs that Red Velvet have released English versions for. This signals to me that SM's way of making the most of Bad Boy's success was to use it to be able to show off Red Velvet's concept. It is still to this day perhaps the strongest venture into the red side of their concept. The song is very inaccessible commercially given its lyrical content, visuals, and the time it was released. So why did they do this, and did they anticipate Really Bad Boy's poor reception globally? Obviously, we would have to speculate about that, but I think their future releases tells us a little bit more about this decision. Zimzalabim was released 7 months later, which was a song we know was held in the SM vault until the moment that Red Velvet was ready to take on the concept. It's been mentioned that Zimzalabim had been in consideration as a Red Velvet title track since as early as Russian Roulette in 2016. In this way, Really Bad Boy and previous divisive releases like Rookie seem to have been released with the intention of setting the groundwork in order for SM to be able to release songs that artistically push the limits. One thing that SM Entertainment does quite well is develop their artists with integrity to the point that releases like Zimzalabim do make sense, despite the listener's personal feelings about the music. There seems to be much more of a willingness to pair their artists with highly divisive songs as a way to express the group's concept and dynamic. Releases like Really Bad Boy and Zimzalabim, more than any others, kind of forces the audience to reconcile with who Red Velvet is and what they're all about. Really Bad Boy ended up doing pretty well domestically, but to have seen the decrease in album sales and general reception that Really Bad Boy got, only to push ahead with Zimzalabim, to me, tells us a lot in retrospect. Still to this day, I would even put Really Bad Boy ahead of Zimzalabim as one of the strongest ventures into the red side of Red Velvet's concept. Really Bad Boy's vocal performance showcases Red Velvet's ability to be theatrical as a group when necessary. There are not many groups in K-pop, even still to this day, that could have committed to the performance that a song like Really Bad Boy requires. It was presented to audiences as a month-late Halloween song that failed to read the room, but in the end, I think that was always the intention for Really Bad Boy. Given the clamoring for more Velvet concepts and attitudes surrounding Rookie in the years prior, the red side of their concept has always been a divisive one, but that doesn't mean Red Velvet is ever going to relinquish it. Would they be better off without this side of their concept? Would they have been a more successful group? Perhaps, but it would have caused Red Velvet to compromise their identity in a lot of ways if they never returned to a red track again for the sake of commercial success. We still see that mentality to this day. Though they've had a lot of instances of their Velvet concept affording them global success, Red Velvet isn't ever going to shy away from releasing a divisive song for the sake of exploring its concept. I've said it many times at this point, but I think that's why Red Velvet is as well renowned as they are today. Their continuous commitment to exploring new styles is what affords them the ability to do anything, and importantly, make it believable just because it's Red Velvet, who historically always seem to know what they're doing whether people like it or not. In this way, in the case of Really Bad Boy and Zimzalabim, I don't think Red Velvet is given nearly enough credit for how much they've contributed to the colorful landscape of K-pop and upholding those values throughout their career so far. These are my thoughts on Really Bad Boy in retrospect as far as its place in Red Velvet's discography given the time and circumstances surrounding its release. I think it's one of the strongest examples of committing to the concept that K-pop has ever seen, and while it was divisive at the time and still is in some ways to this day, it is their unwavering commitment and attention to exploring both sides of their concept fully that has purchased them the legacy they have today. Red Velvet are who they are today due to their commitment to ideas that exist outside of what is most commercial and palatable. They represent and uphold the values of the vibrant and colorful side of K-pop. They're the best of the best in that regard. Thank you for watching this. If you did, let me know what your thoughts are on Really Bad Boy. Have your thoughts on it changed over time, or do you see the significance of its release in a different way? What are your thoughts on the red versus velvet aspect to this conversation, and so on? Thanks again for watching. Subscribe if you want to, and I will see you next time.